How can you clear emotional clutter? How can you heal old wounds and mindfully process your emotions? That's what this episode is about. You're listening to Pure Light, where we explore how you can believe in yourself and be happy with who you are. My name is Eiley. I help people do what they feel called to do. I'm a coach, writer, and yoga and meditation teacher. This is episode 155, and this episode is an interview with GuruMeher. GuruMeher Khalsa is a certified yoga therapist and professional life coach. He's the author of Senses of the Soul, and his new book, Emotional Liberation, comes out on February 1st. Welcome, GuruMeher.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm excited to talk to you. And I want to start actually by sharing a story. This is something that happened 10 years ago when I was in my first yoga teacher training. I was out for dinner with a friend, one of the other participants, and I remember her saying to me something about how she wants to feel her emotions more deeply. And I looked at her like she was crazy. And I was like, why would you want to do that? So I'm curious to hear your take on that.
How many years ago was that?
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. That's not the you that I know now, but but it's a great question because it's typical of people's reactions. So why do we dislike difficult emotions? Let me count the ways. They feel bad. I mean, we just don't like that experience of anger, shame, guilt, depression. It's just we consider those the antithesis of happy, right? So that's the first. It's an unpleasant experience. Second, when emotions take over and rule us, which they tend to do when they're strong, we act against our best interest. We do and say things that hurt the people that we love or hurt us or ruin our chances at work, when we act out. So those are two huge ones. They're confusing and we don't know what to do with them. And they make us feel like something's wrong with us, or, they are weaknesses or they are defects. We're kind of ashamed of them, and we get shamed for them. Think about how women are treated in regards to anger, that we know what we call them. And so how men are generally treated. These are gender cliches about, fear. How depression is just societally both feared and reviled because we're in such an aggressive society. Everyone should be up and cheery and going and working hard. So that's to name a few why we and sum that all up, that we've just been horribly mistrained about our emotions. We've been told by our parents, oh, get over it. Don't feel that. You should feel this. We've been told what to feel, what not to feel, how we should feel. So in general, we've just been miseducated about our emotions.
Right. Yeah. And I think what you're saying is so important because there's so much judgment around it that, like, this is what it should be. You shouldn't feel this in certain contexts and, for certain genders as well, potentially.
Look at even in the yoga world or spirituality or maybe even religion, you should, if you're a good blank, you should be happy, cheerful, forgiving. You're told these positive feelings that you should have. Think about how people get depressed around the holidays, birthdays, because again, you should feel up, but maybe you don't. So there's a lot of societal judgments and expectations.
Right. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who is like me 10 years ago? Like if someone was like, oh, I don't know if I really want to get into my emotions, like what would you tell them?
Where to start? Let's see. Well, first of all, you can't not feel. You just can't. Sorry. Nor would you want to, because if you're going to try to block out what you consider negative feelings, it's the same equipment. You're going to dull down or block out positive feelings. You just can't. You can't stop the day without stopping the night. So that would be my first, like, sorry, you just can't not feel. Haven't you tried? Haven't you repressed and suppressed and, bottled it up or medicated it or, distracted from it, from emotions? So there's just the blunt bad news. It's like it's your heartbeat, your breath, you're, as long as you're alive, you're going to feel. And if I can just give you the bad news first, and okay, so I got to deal with them. The good news is they're just a rich source of information, of healing, of knowing how to take care of yourself. So once you can get over, so you've got to you can start with a new idea that maybe, with all I've said before, maybe there's something really valuable in them. Why did we evolve over millions of years? Animals have emotions too. Why did we evolve with this complex system without, nature's very efficient and economical. We wouldn't have spent millions of years of evolution throughout all the animal kingdom without some very important purpose to these things, our feelings.
Right. So what would you say that purpose is? Like, what is the purpose of our feelings?
Okay. And you may know that I call emotions the senses of the soul. So why do we have physical senses? You tell me. Why do I have eyes, not eyes, but why do I have sight and hearing and touch, etc.?
I mean, to take in data from the world and interact with it.
Yeah. And that data, the point of that data is I can tell what's good for me and go for it. I can tell what's bad for me and go away from it. So if those are our physical senses to help us navigate the world to our own benefit, avoid harm, then what are the senses of the soul? Well, our world is not entirely physical. There's a lot of non-physical things you can't see or taste or touch. Like, I can see you and you look like you're friendly, but I don't know. Maybe, how do I feel about you? How do you feel about me? I can't always read that on your face. You may be having a knife behind your back and ready to stab me in the back. Right? I mean, that's a social thing. Stab me in the back. You might not have my best interests in mind. Well, but my eyes could fool me because you could talk sweet and look sweet. So I've got to have a subtler set of senses that can sense when something's not visible, but still harmful to me or beneficial to me. So I'm navigating on a subtler level with my emotions when things don't feel right. That spite, that tingle in your belly, like, oh, I don't like this.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting? What came to mind as you were talking about our, physical senses versus the senses of the soul is, I feel like they're almost a tool to get more in alignment with your soul's path.
Okay, now you're jumping ahead. So let's start just a step before that. So we're social animals. If you think of back, we feel like, oh, we can live in our house without anybody now, but think back, we can't really. Think back to the cave times. You had a clan and you couldn't do everything. You weren't strong enough, or, you didn't have all the skills. So without your clan and your cave to protect you, if you are if people don't like you in your clan, if people suspect you, it would be a life or death situation if you're kicked out of the cave on your own in the woods. So we developed very subtle and accurate social cues to know, like, hey, am I in with you? Am I out with you? Hey, we were good yesterday, but there's a look on your face today. I'm getting a feeling from you. So we had millions of years to evolve this subtler social sense of, am I okay with others of my kind, of my species, of my tribe? And think about how that relates today. So think about, do you remember, God, grade school or high school, like, oh my God, am I in or am I out? Do they like me? Do they not? Boyfriends and girlfriends, we had to use all the emotions and the feelings, and we didn't know how to use them so well, but you can see that equipment was there to get through social navigation. So let's take it now to the next level. So say again, what does that mean? Ask your question again and sort of explain it a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that some of the like talking about safety and danger and navigating that in the world, like I think it's easier to think about that like in terms of like if you see a fire or if you touch something and it's like hot and it's going to burn you. But with emotions, it's maybe not as obvious. And so just as you were talking about it, it seems like maybe that is how we get in alignment with our soul's path and with like what we're really here to do.
All right, so let me put that in context. You know that we have a hierarchy of needs. We first need just to survive, food and water, and then we want a sense of safety, that we can survive not just now, but maybe into the future. And after we leave food and water and other basics like sleep, everything else is really psychological. Do I feel safe? Do I think I'm safe? Do I feel accepted and appreciated and loved? And, do I have, we go on up, do I have a sense of my own self-worth? Do I have a sense of purpose? I need all these things. They're all psychological needs. So they get subtle very fast. And so our senses turn out to be our senses of the soul, our emotions tend to match that level of subtlety and sensitivity. So let's say I've got a job. So I can pay the rent, so I can eat. So I'm meeting my very basic needs, but I'm not really, I hate to go to work. I feel depressed. I'm sad. I don't, my job isn't fulfilling me. Now that I can eat and stay warm, I've got more subtle needs.
Right.
So soul, if soul is anything, soul is a word that describes subtlety, something you can't see or touch, but you feel. So we very quickly get into, how do I feel? Why do I feel so bad, even though I've got a good job that 5 years ago, I just was so happy I got this job. And now I hate my job. I feel like I don't want to get up in the morning. So that's more than meets the eye. I've got to feel my way through like why I'm depressed. So yes, my soul wants an ever elevating level of requirements that fulfill me, right? So I can have purpose, meaning, a mission in my life. Do you know if you look up the hierarchy of needs, we have intellectual needs, we have beauty needs, like aesthetic needs, we have self-empowerment, self-fulfillment needs, and then we have self-transcendent needs, like if we've got everything else, so we're totally got it made, we've got a need to go beyond just this. Like I want to know, I want to be one with the universe. So you're absolutely right that emotions can navigate us through every level, from most basic to most elevated.
Right. Yeah. So, how would you suggest someone starts the process of doing that navigation?
It's all about self-awareness. So we've got this equipment, and in our miseducation, we were, because they felt bad and we were told they were bad, we worked really hard to cut ourselves off from this amazing source of information that we've just been describing the importance of and the application of. So we've spent a lot of times a lot of time to develop ways to numb or withdraw from feelings. Or on the other hand, we haven't learned that, and we get overtaken by emotions and then they rule us. So we've got to find a middle ground, just like the Buddhist middle way. Well, we've got to have an emotional middle way, from somewhere between complete walling myself off and going numb, and completely having the emotion so strong that it overtakes me. So the middle way would be that I can feel it, but I've still got some agency. I've got some choice in the feeling of emotions. Now, all that equipment, I've worked with hundreds of people, and many start out not being able to feel, not being willing to feel. And yeah, they're trepidatious. Like, why would I go back into that? But the equipment's there, and people generally, without an exception, if they're willing and can slowly get back into the water. I don't know if you're young enough to, old enough to remember the movie Jaws when it came out. Like people got afraid to go swimming in the ocean and lakes after Jaws came out.
In lakes too?
Well, I guess,
yeah, maybe. Yeah, of water in general, yeah.
That you couldn't see through. And it took some people time to go get over it. It was like it was a vicarious trauma is what it was.
Right.
And so emotions are very watery. So the analogy is very apt to put your toe back in the emotional waters. Like, I've been depressed and I don't want to feel stuff anymore. Or my mom was, really angry. And so I don't want to go there. That was a true story with my dad. My dad he was a repressor. He'd be just sitting there kind of drinking and then every now and then there'd be this outburst. So he would do both. So I was like, well, I don't want either of those. So I'll just not deal with my emotions. But back to your question, you've got to be willing. And this piece of information that maybe there's a good purpose to all of them, and maybe I can do it safely. It's all self-awareness. If I can mindfully just pay attention. So my main technique is to get people to practice mindfulness. Just what am I, mindfulness starts with what am I hearing? What am I feeling on my skin? Just the senses, and just let that emotion, let those physical senses, let me be aware of them without reacting to them. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we need to be with emotions. So when I'm ready, what am I feeling? And can I learn slowly that I can feel it without, maybe even if it doesn't feel good, but it doesn't hurt me. I can go in, be mindful, feel, I was really upset earlier, I was angry. I can sit here meditatively and feel that again, but not either go crazy and hurt somebody, nor numb it out. I can sit here and safely feel it. And so generally in my trainings and my books, I just help people take little steps into that water, depending on their own history with emotions. They're going to go slow and be safe on their own. And of course, we also have, strong techniques through yoga, breathing techniques and movements that can ready us, like readying for putting armor on before going into battle, where you can feel like, hey, I feel strong and safe and protected, and I'm ready to go in.
Right. Without numbing, though, with just allowing the experience to be there.
Yeah, it's another analogy is if you've ever gone cave diving, it can be scary. Some people love it, but it can be scary. But if I've got the right equipment, if I'm ready, I've got ropes and lights, and maybe I need some air, some oxygen. So once I feel that I've got the equipment that can make me safe to do it, then I can go on in and do it. So that's awareness and, nervous system readiness is what I teach people to do, so they can go in and safely spelunk through the darkness of their emotions. And we better, add a little carrot to this whole thing, because it doesn't necessarily still sound so great. What's remarkable is, because this is such an important evolutionary system of self-awareness, that once we do start relating to them, we start learning a lot about ourselves. We start learning, why am I afraid of this person or that situation? Why does that thing get me so upset and angry? So we start, well, I call it self-therapy. We start understanding ourselves and why we feel things and what we need to do about them. And we start solving our own problems. There's the big carrot, folks. If none of this sounded good before, I've got a quote, a real life quote. This was better than 20 years of therapy. That's a person that had done a lot of things. Not that the other things didn't help, but when they started getting their own answers, things started moving and problems started solving.
Yeah, I believe that. I started reading your new book over the weekend, Emotional Liberation, and even just like the first chapter where you kind of look at some of the things from your past that maybe haven't been fully processed or digested, and like it was interesting for me to notice what events from my past haven't showed up. I think a lot of the stuff that hasn't shown up is the stuff that I've talked about on this podcast that I've really processed. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, there was more stuff that I identified, and it's almost like clearing emotional cobwebs. It's like, ooh, there's something that, like, if I work through this and figure out what this is and how it's been impacting me, like that opens up new possibilities.
Well, you brought up another really important talking point. So the book is called Emotional Liberation, Life Beyond Triggers and Trauma. So we do a lot of careful navigation in the book to understand the link between what triggers us now, what gets us upset, and what happened in our past that was very difficult. And the link in short order is that when things in my past were very difficult, traumatic, and we do try to say that, look, everybody's been traumatized. Everybody's been maybe more or less severe, of course, but everyone's had adverse and difficult experiences that changed us, that modified our way of being in the world, of thinking and feeling. And usually when we say unprocessed, it means the effects of those experiences on us has left us less full, less able to be ourselves, less able to handle life. It's created dysfunctions, okay? So the adaptations, the effects on us of those earlier experiences, which mostly happen when we're very young, but could have happened yesterday. Trauma can be at any point. But most of our formative stuff happened early on. It's when those are not processed, those are the areas that are the source of our triggers today. So when the thing, if you want to start, we look at patterns in the book, like what are your patterns of, like what's the constant argument you have with your blank person in your life that every time they do X, you get upset and do, Z. Well, those things aren't just random. Why do I act crazy in certain situations? I can trace it back to where it came from, and I can process that. Either way, I don't have to remember the trauma, by the way. I can process from today's patterns of upset or from the past, but they're linked. So if I heal one, I heal them both, and I'm free.
Right. Yeah, because it's kind of like clearing that energy out of your system so that you don't have that hanging on and like affecting you in some way.
Yeah, and I say it in an additional way, which is the promise. I've never said it this way. The promise of trauma, if you will, is that it's an evolutionary pressure on us to grow. So I couldn't handle something when it traumatized me, but can I learn and grow and mature so I know how to handle that kind of situation now? That's my measure of healing, that I can now realize, I can handle, somebody doing that kind of thing to me, well, I couldn't handle it when I was 5 years old, but I can handle it now. And now I can relax, and now I can go, oh, I've learned, I've grown. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So confidence is one of the also like I guess side effects of doing this work. Like I can handle this, I can do this. Resilience, feeling happier. What else would you say people get out of kind of processing their old wounds?
Freedom, emotional liberation. Like my very first class years ago, somebody signed up, and first class they said, oh God, emotional liberation. Thank God, because I really want to get rid of these things. And I'm like, sorry, no. You're going to learn to live with them and more richly. So you're going to always feel, you don't want to cut off your sensory system, but so being free to feel, for instance, things like, this is a little bit of a lighter example, but watch how people who cry in the presence of others, how they apologize, how they try to stop it, how they, like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying. I say reclaim the beauty of crying, because, sadness is one of the most heartfelt, heart-opening emotions. So to never apologize again for any of your feelings, and to use them wisely. Are you kidding? Like, try to imagine, I think I talk about this in the opening or closing of the book. Like, imagine our world leaders, people who decide the fate of millions and of nations, and how they're sometimes just like petulant children, acting out their greed or their desire or their anger or retribution. Like, if everyone knew how to process their emotions in a skillful and beneficial way, I have no qualms in saying we would have world peace. It's just, but so if that sounds big, well, the benefits to a person is having personal peace.
Right.
Like nobody can just, so people can still upset you, but no one could ruin your life or your day, even if you can process what just happened.
Right. Because you have the tools to let go of that and whatever kind of energy or feelings you have associated with that.
So, short answer to your question is just try to imagine being free to move through life. Things, confront you. You understand what you're feeling and why and what to do about it. And you do that and you move on. Big events might take longer. I've had, big things that took weeks to months to really process, but not years, and not never either. Like, there's people who just live and die and never get over it. Think about, I had a person that worked in the hospice, and she talked about how this person lived in an area where there were mostly rich people confronting old age and death. Let's just put it that way. And they did it with such, like, when their husbands died, the women would just buy tons more stuff. Like, how can I evade death? People would die very angrily. Even if they've had a pretty good life or lots, wealth or whatever. So being able to, how do I get into this? Being able to move through life and live and die happily, peacefully, at peace with whatever has happened. You talked earlier about unprocessed. So when I'm unprocessed, I'm not at peace with the person, place, thing, or my own self, with what has happened. But if I can be at peace with it, I can live complete and I can die complete.
Right. Yeah, because you're in total acceptance of what is.
Yeah, not surrender. Well, surrender's has two meanings. So not in denial or resistance or disquiet. about what is. But so acceptance in the real deep sense of like, I'm okay with this. And why am I okay with it? Because it has sourced me, it has fed me. Even the work. So back to my definition of healing of trauma, like I've grown from this thing, and therefore there's no loss, there's nothing to regret.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because from that perspective, trauma is actually something that makes us stronger. So like it's not a negative thing.
Well, it is until it's processed. Let's say it is until it's a hurtful thing, harmful thing, until I've resurfaced, from or my analogy is if you ever go sailing, and the wind just blows your boat over and you're in the water and but if you can right the boat, if you can recover from whatever blew you over, you can sail on.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. There's another little story I want to share with you. A couple of years ago, I was visiting a friend in California and we were on the highway and she was driving and her husband said something to her that was along the lines of like, "Hey honey, like there's a tractor trailer behind you. Just wanted to let you know, like you may want to move over," or something like that. And that was really interesting for me because I think previously in my own romantic relationships and those of people around me, there's been so much judgment around, telling people how to drive or, like having that conversation in the car. And I thought it was
Well,
interesting that you brought it up in the book.
well, first of all, what was the end part of her story? How did she react to his?
She was like, "Oh, thanks for telling me." Whereas normally what I had seen previously was kind of like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be doing that." Like, have you like, and there was just this assumption that like someone's doing something wrong and it should be done differently. And that was how the whole communication unfolded. And it was a totally like, this is why this story stands out because it's an everyday thing. But that was the first time I had seen it done in a way that wasn't like full of like anger or angst or like, a whole bunch of negative emotions.
Right. So their history, his and hers, was such that in this case, that advice was meant helpfully and it was taken helpfully.
Right.
And there was no issue. There was no trigger. So I think you're about to bring up the case where that's not the case.
Yeah, because I know you talked about in the book, like how you sometimes don't, or in the past haven't taken it well when your wife will give you directions or something like that.
So what would you like for me to say about that?
Well, I think I wanted to bring it up because it's such a good example of like how this applies directly to everyday life. And I guess well, the question is like, do you think it's possible to be free of all of that?
Well, yes, and this story will be an example of that. So first of all, we have to explain to everybody because you and I know the story, and so the story is, in contrast to Eileen's friend's story, I write in the book. I give an example because I want to take people through understanding patterns, reactive patterns of their own. So I have to give an example, and I give my own example. And it's there are worse upsets. So this is a moderate one, a mild one, pretty much. But the story is when I'm driving with my wife in the car, and she mentions either, "Hey, remember to turn up there," or "There's a truck behind you," or gives me any direction or advice, pretty much, it's a trigger for me. And what is a trigger? A trigger means I go from like, "Hey, we're having a good day," to like, "Argh." Like I'm suddenly changed. The change is an emotion comes up, right? So we break this down in the book so you can do it yourself. And the goal is to, heal on a deep level old wounds so that the practical result is you don't have these you can eliminate reactive patterns. So my wife and I are just enjoying going somewhere. We're having a good time. And then when I'm triggered, we're not, I'm not having a good time anymore. I shut down. So, and she's not having a good time anymore. So how many minutes, hours, days, are wasted then where we're not communicating or enjoying life because of my trigger? So that's the possible benefit. But I said before, this isn't a real heavy one, but I've counseled lots of people where, for instance, if this thing goes on, because I get upset, and I haven't explained the full story, but it's in the book, so she gives directions. I get, angry and shut down. Those are my reactions. And I think things like, well, I know that. I'm not stupid. Why are you trying to tell me? You're so controlling, things like that. Question is, why do I do that? Why do I do that? And the woman in Eileen's story doesn't, right? Where's my wound? What wound is she, unknowingly, prodded and got me, like, kicked the hornet's nest in me, right? Well, I got interested in that. Why do I do that? And I'd really like to not do that. So I think we won't do the whole spoiler, here but we want to entice people to do this. But I think your question was, what's the benefit? Well, I share the story in the book with my wife's permission because I think I say in the book, I'm like 95% over it. Like I've been working on this. I've been analyzing, I've been understanding it all the way back to where, what's the deep belief and the need and the wound that I can heal. So I'll tell you this, like if and when it happens now, if I have a little reaction, I'm watching myself react. For years, it was just like, I didn't know I was doing that. I was just doing that. I was just upset. So now if it happens, it's very mild. And I'm like, oh, it's happening. I'm doing it. Okay, GuruMeher, there you are. But you understand why. So and each time now is just a little more processing. So 96% over it, 97% over it. And I think the thing to maybe conclude this with is, I asked the question, like, of myself, why don't I take that information as a helpful partner that I'm in partnership with, just trying to help me so we're both safe? It's weird that I don't. In fact, instead, I take it as an affront to my intelligence, to my capability, to my manhood. And think about how I'm just going to run with the general class of how men react. And abuse women. When women are, again, in a not universal, but in a pretty statistically accurate case, when women are innocent or helpful or loving, and men still can't take it and abuse and stuff like that. So we've just gone from a light example to really this stuff is heavy, and it's when it spins out and it's an implication. And this is really a human condition that we have of unprocessed generational wounds that cause us to do more harm.
Right.
So we remain harmed and harming.
Yeah. And I think the more that we do this work, the more that we can change those patterns so that is no longer the case.
Well, I'm a testament to it. I went from years of doing that, and make no mistake, if that thing goes on and on and on, one day I want a divorce. It starts, it didn't even happen when we were first,
the car thing you're talking about now, the driving. Yeah.
When we were first engaged, or, then it shows up, you're all honeymoon, and then it shows up and you're kind of upset. And then it starts locking into a regular pattern.
Right.
And believe me, if I react this way to, her trying to be helpful with driving, you can bet it's not the only place that I can't take, advice or suggestions. So I mentioned this earlier. I meet many couples who, if I'm counseling them, something that was very innocent long ago, they are just in such deep hatred because it's gone on so long that the anger's built and the hurt's built and they've gotten back and forth. And so these things start trivially, but they end up with dire consequences. And if we're willing to look at ourselves and look at these patterns and do the work, it doesn't have to come to that second and third husbands and wives, because we have to, we got to go back in and start over and not learn. So we repeat the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think actually specifically with the driving example, like the first time maybe that someone offers a suggestion, it may be, an act of generosity, but then depending on how that's received, the next time there may be more and more layers of judgment or negativity or that kind of thing in it. And that's where you get into that deep-seated conflict that just kind of perpetuates and builds.
I'll add another little story that's very, self-revealing. Because in the book, we talk about breakdown, when you're triggered, what do you start thinking about that person? What do you start feeling? What do you start doing? Break it down to all the pieces of your pattern. And one of my judgments and thoughts when I'm triggered is, like, I'm a really good driver and you're not. And so you're scared because you don't understand that I got this under control, like, what?
I think we got cut out there for a second.
Okay.
So I heard that you're thinking that you're a good driver and they're not.
Yeah. So I have judgments about, she's just scared and so that one day, as I'd been working on this, we were in Mexico, down in a town, and it's like tiny streets and kind of a little hectic and foreign and everything. And she's doing her thing, like where she's like jumpy and everything, and I'm like, oh God. And then I think, like, and this is some time into me doing this self-awareness work, and I said, okay, let me see if I can drive for the next 10 to 20 minutes in such a way that she doesn't do that thing that irritates me, like where she's just so scared and freaky. So I slow way down. To me, I'm just like, brother, I got to come to a full stop. I got to go slow, So I started being willing to look at myself. And sure enough, I was able to drive in such a way that she remained relaxed. So I went from a defensive posture to, like, instead of defending myself and my ability to drive, I said, well, even if I don't see a sense of danger and she does, can I be generous and drive in such a way that she's not tense? And I could. I just had to modify how I drive, which I thought was, unnecessarily cautious. But what a difference between, like, don't tell me what to do and I'm not going to change, to she just made me a calmer, safer driver.
Wow.
If I was willing to listen, self-review, not always be right, and I won't say that has permanently changed my driving style, but it's certainly given me other options, both to how to help her be more relaxed, which is going to be better for me if she's relaxed, and how to, in fact, be a safer driver.
Right. Yeah. So it's like being proactive around the whole thing.
So I hope your listeners will, we've been sharing these stories that are meant to be illustrative, to help, you see in yourself what I call everyday insanity, where we think, hey, I'm normal. And yet we do these crazy things, that aren't in our best interest or others, and be able to, with some compassion and some humor and some honesty, to be able to look at them and go, like, yeah, I get a little crazy. And could I, what would it look like if I were more calm, more sane, more nice, more balanced, more emotionally healthy.
Right. Yeah. Free of the patterns that you don't want to have.
And I've been using a phrase recently, emotional maturity. We look at childhood development, and we look at personal development. And as a life coach, I used to help people like, as an adult, how do we continue to mature to higher levels of maturity and ability? And so we don't, all parts of us develop the same. We know that teenagers develop physically, they mature faster than they develop emotionally. And there's different areas of our lives. And so I'm really advocating for people, whatever's happened to them in the past, wherever they may be now, that we can all proactively and at our own hand elevate our emotional maturity. We can become more emotionally mature, where we don't act like little brats and little spoiled children and have tantrums and withdraw. And if I'm sounding like judgmental, I'm including myself. Like, come on, let's say we act like little babies a lot of the time, and let's grow up and be emotionally mature.
Yeah. And then we can build that world that has peace for everyone, not just internally, but within how we relate to each other.
So after that whole story, and I again hope it's illustrative and helps people be interested in inquiring into their own patterns. But the book then, after I share my story, I said, oh, there's a paragraph that says, okay, now show me yours. So we take people through like, okay, I gave you an idea. Now, can you see one of your patterns? Let's start breaking it down, and let me help lead you through the process where you will someday be over it, where you just don't get upset about that thing that now causes trouble.
Right. Yeah. And how freeing would that be?
Liberating.
Yeah. It would be emotional liberation.
Yeah.
So, GuruMeher, how can people find you and how can they work with you?
Well, with my new book, I'm sending people to emotional dash. I think in Canada you call it a hyphen.
We do.
Emotional hyphen liberation.com. And there you'll see my book and my courses. I've got 2 great 8-week courses that go along with this book. You can do online, and there's videos that you watch, but I also meet with you every week in a small group. So there's real like hands-on life-changing coaching that goes on. So that's a good place to go. And from there, you can link over to another website, Senses of the Soul, based on my first book. We'll eventually unite those websites. But I'd say emotional-liberation is a place to go, .com. And I'm still a small organization. I answer most of my own emails and happy to talk to people. And people can be a little trepidatious about doing this work, especially with someone they don't know. And so, this podcast might help people get to know me a little bit, but I usually have conversations with people, and so they can feel comfortable, because really you want to feel safe going into, we talked about earlier, if I'm just on my own going into my emotions, I want to feel safe. Well, if I'm going into them with the guidance of somebody else, I want to feel safe. I should mention that I also have a 10-month program where I take people. So the 8-week programs take people through this pattern identification and processing. The other one is an introduction to the 7 heavy emotions, how to get to befriend them. And if you like those introductory, I shouldn't call them introductory because they're pretty significant. But then I've got a full 10-month training where we spend a month on each of these, fear and anger and depression. And I'll be in my 7th year of teaching it. And so I can tell you that people, I can't even list the kinds of changes that people get, but, it's deep self-therapy, and there's lots of things that people understand and resolve. It's life-changing. I can't deny it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like a deep dive and almost it sounds like a rebirth, emotionally speaking. Like you kind of
Things that we evolve, right? Humans evolve, science evolves, everything mostly keeps elevating. And so how we can understand ourselves and heal ourselves is evolving too. And there's a big jump. I mean, psychotherapy is only what, 150 years old or so, that people had a way of talking. But the yoga meditation traditions are thousands of years old, where people would do self-awareness, to do self-understanding, to do self-therapy. So I draw on those traditions, and I'd say in our culture at large, and I'm just a part of it, that we're in a stage of accelerated ability to self-heal, understanding how to, and ability to self-heal, that's happening broadly throughout the society, and just barely in time. Are we going to destroy ourselves? Since I was a kid, it's like, are we going to destroy ourselves or really do great? And the question's still there. Then it was nuclear annihilation, which is still an issue you don't hear much about, but it's considered worse than ever by the experts. And now we've got climate change, where we just can't manage ourselves well enough to save ourselves. So yeah, there's an evolutionary pressure and necessity that we understand ourselves and can manage our emotions. So let's do it.
yeah. Yeah, well, we can all heal ourselves, and I know your work is an amazing tool to help people do that. So I'll include links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes, which you can find at purelightpodcast.com. So thank you, GuruMeher, for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to talk. Every time I talk, I kind of learn more and realize more, and hopefully help some people. So thank you, Eileen.
Well, awesome. I'm sure that people will be helped by this conversation. So thank you all for listening. Until next time, may you be guided by your light.